Hello, everyone, and welcome to the next edition of the sales webinar series here at the Center for Professional Selling at Ball State University. I'm your host, Dr. Deva Rangarajan. And today, as the first speaker for 2020, I have the pleasure of having Mr. Lieven Bertier from a company called BARCO. For those of you wondering what BARCO does, I strongly urge you to visit www.barco.com. But if you go to any of these wonderful movies that you go to the AMC, if you just seen the latest Star Wars movies and stuff like that, the chances are that one of the projectors that projected it on the big screen was actually a BARCO projector. But apart from that, BARCO does a lot of variety of products, which I strongly urge you to go visit their website. But today, Lieven is the marketing guru for one of their products called Clickshare, which has grown rapidly over the years, mostly due to marketing efforts that has driven the sales. So we're going to talk to Lieven today about how marketing can play a very critical role in a B2B context in driving sales. So Lieven, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me and our audience.
Thank you very much for the invitation, Deva. It's a pleasure to be here, and it's my privilege to kick off your 2020 series of videos.
Absolutely. Lieven, tell us a little bit more about this concept of Clickshare. I know that we're going to talk about marketing, but tell them so that the audience understands what Clickshare is.
Yeah, so Clickshare, to put it very easily, is a tool that allows you to wirelessly show what you have on your laptop or on your smartphone onto the meeting room screen. Most of us have grown up with VGA cables or with HDMI cables.
Yeah.
Clickshare turns all of this wirelessly. And how it works, very simply put, when you have a communication, there's always a sender, there's always a receiver, and there's always a protocol that is used to communicate between sender and receiver. In the case of Clickshare, the sender is the so-called Clickshare button, or it can also be a Clickshare app that you install on your laptop. The receiver is a little box, a base unit that is mounted behind the screen or behind the projector in the meeting room. And of course, we have our own proprietary protocol allowing for transmission between sender and receiver.
Yeah. And one of the things that Lieven, I don't know if you're aware of that, when they were first doing the prototype testing, a long time ago, I was one of the people that was interviewed, because initially when they were looking at Clickshare, the main purpose was in group meetings and stuff, where the best way to get the most out of every meeting was to have people participate. But it was very time consuming. Everybody had to present their work. They had to take their laptop over to the front and connect it. And how BARCO was looking at ways by which people could actually participate in a discussion, leading to much better discussions and much better outcomes, correct? That's pretty much the whole idea of Clickshare, is to have more effective and efficient meetings to have good outcomes, correct?
Absolutely. It's about taking away any friction you may have in what we call joining the conversation. And if or when you are in a meeting and for instance your CEO is there, it's very hard to say, hey, can I take over the screen?
Yeah.
With Clickshare, you can do this in a very gentle way, and you can just make sure that you can share your view literally, but of course also as a matter of speaking. And that's the promise we are bringing. And we do this in a very easy, very user-friendly way, because from the moment you launch the app or plug in the button, all the connections go automatically. So there is no actions to be taken. There's no settings that you have to take care of. Everything goes automatically. All you have to do is click literally to start sharing your screen, to start sharing your view.
Indeed. Now, one of the things which always struck me was the outcomes are fantastic in terms of what you can have in a meeting. But if you take a look at the product itself, it's relatively small in terms of size. Again, I'm not talking in terms of what it does. The reason why I bring this up is that in terms of what you're taking a look at and the base price and unit price and everything else, tell us a little bit more about how you decided to bring the product to market.
Yeah, so for BARCO, this is what I would call a relatively cheap product. Clickshare starts at $750 US. The most expensive version is close to $4,000 US at the moment. So that is relatively cheap, especially for a B2B company that is still specialized, for instance, in cinema projectors or X-ray screens that are used in healthcare. So it was relatively cheap. So this means that we needed to pursue a certain volume with this product. And one of our ways to do this is, for instance, we opted for what we call a two-tier approach. So that means we set up a network of distributors who in turn will provide product to a network of resellers in the countries we are active. So that is one of the key things we took in order to establish our footprint, let's say, in order to have enough feet on the street for this product, because we simply, as an organization, could not afford going from one company to the other to sell the product at this price point.
So you said a two. So essentially, what you're talking about is that it's BARCO, which makes the products. Clickshare goes through your distributors, which then goes out to the end customers. And your end customers are still B2B customers, right? You are not talking about B2C. Now, so essentially what you're talking about is a B2B2B company, essentially dealing with B2B end customers as well. Now, when you talk about this, when you talk about the idea that you have your end customers and also B2B customers, where you went up against traditional projectors and traditional ways of conducting meetings and stuff like that. So to what extent do you think that you had to come up with the right kind of marketing collateral to raise awareness with your end customers so that they could go to your distributors and ask for your particular product? Am I making sense out here?
Absolutely, absolutely. So what I think is very special in this route to market we've chosen is, on the one hand, you need to communicate to and through your partner network, which is very important because they need to be aware of what you're offering. They need to understand the benefits of the product. They need to be able to translate it or bring it to the customers. That's what I call the push side. So it's really about pushing through the communication through the channel. At the same time, and that's one of the learnings also of our journey, it's not enough just to have this push, because there's also the need for pull. That means that manufacturer, you need to build awareness for your product with the customers who will ultimately buy it, and you need to bring in the leads. And so for us, the marketing story of Clickshare is a story of push and pull, and you cannot have one without the other to be in order to be successful.
Yeah. And for me, that's what I think is very, very fascinating about your story. So if you could tell me, when you launched this, or at least when you took over the marketing part of this, right, what was your kind of practices that you had in place? So essentially tell me about what you were doing in terms of pull and what were you doing in terms of push. I'm not talking about now, I'm talking about when you took over marketing for Clickshare.
Yeah. Before I go into the question, maybe I would like to outline that there's like three big phases that we had with the product. And first of all, we launched the product as a BARCO product. So it was all BARCO branded and was all going through the BARCO organization that we had. And the BARCO brand added, I mean, BARCO's been on this planet for more than 80 years. So the BARCO brand added a lot of credibility to Clickshare, and that's what we needed to get going. Over time, we little by little started to build our own Clickshare brand, let's say, and it's of course still linked to BARCO, but that's one of the steps we took. We had to sort of break away a little bit from BARCO in order to establish our own playground, in order to be a bit more the rebel, the new kid in town, let's say. And now we are about to enter a new phase again, whereby we want to position ourselves as the market leader. So that's three, I would say, very, very clear phases that we had in our branding. And that's related to your question on what are the tools that you need, or what are the tools that you have. Because when we launched the product, it was pretty traditional, because I mean, we were using brochures, and we were using a number of presentations, and we had web pages, and we went to our trade shows where we had always gone as BARCO, and little by little we started establishing a footprint. And we did all of that under the BARCO brand. And there was growth, but the growth was, I mean, it was picking up, but it was not yet what I would call exponential growth. exponential growth came the moment we decided, hey, this is not just about a BARCO product, but this is about a product that is revolutionizing the world. And that's when we decided to invest heavily in marketing. We teamed up with one of the biggest agencies in the world. We came up with a brand new message, which was focused just on killing the cable, killing that HDMI or VGA cable. We went for a look and feel that was distinct from anybody else in the market. So we went for a yellowish. We had a lot of fun elements in there, and we had a tagline: plug into simplicity, tap into amazing. And we started building everything around this, and all of a sudden we were very recognizable. We invested heavily also in marketing activities, a lot of digital activities, of course, because those can be tracked, those can be traced. And what we also did is we started mapping the return of our marketing investments, meaning the number of leads that we brought in. And then, of course, if you look at those leads, how do they progress up to the point where we sign on a new customer. And once we started understanding that dynamic, it was about scaling this mechanism that we had found out by investing heavily in marketing.
Lieven, one of the things you talk about is that, but when you initially were using the BARCO name, right? So to what extent did you also measure whether the message that you wanted to bring with Clickshare, when you were doing it under the whole BARCO name, was it giving you the returns or was it loss? You see what I mean? That yes, you were doing all this, but you could not very clearly, granularly say that using that marketing machine of BARCO leads to results. You see what I mean? In terms of were you able to document certain number of leads you would get from there, cost per lead, which of course was easier once you went with more digital tools, but with the more traditional tools, was it easy for you to try and take a look at that?
For the more traditional tools, it's easy to map out the leads you bring in because, for instance, you meet people at trade shows, you meet people at events that you set up. So there's a face-to-face moment, I would say. So you can collect the lead, and then of course in your CRM system, if everything is documented properly, you can follow up the progress. But of course, if you think about an investment, as I said, of $1,000 or a few thousand US dollars to be made, that is less discipline, of course, in completing a CRM system. That's one. Secondly, let's not forget that the leads were fulfilled through the channel. So that means that very often it's a non-BARCO person following up on the lead, and then it becomes a big hassle to close the loop, let's say. So that was pretty hard. And I have to say, it's a lot easier to do this with digital tools these days.
So one of the arguments that is being made, of course, is the fact that when you use traditional tools, I'm not going back, and the fact is that when you use traditional tools, the ability for you to customize your message is a lot harder. To what extent do you think that your ability to customize because of these new tools according to the kind of customer, maybe you could even go and say, okay, you are the IT profile, so the kind of the personalization of the message. To what extent do you think that is going to be very critical to get much, not just leads, but better leads than what you had before?
It's a big help, of course. I mean, if I look at our personas, the ones we are focusing on are, on the one hand, the facility manager. On the other hand, there's the IT manager. Very often, there's also a C-level persona involved because ultimately they will be signing off for better engagement, for better collaboration in the company. And let's not forget the people in the meeting, the people who, the meeting warriors, as I like to call them, are also a very important persona to focus on. But the first three are the really important ones when it comes to the decision making. And so knowing who you have in front of you and doing this profiling step by step, completing their profile, capturing data, capturing information until the point you know, hey, okay, these are the arguments that will resonate because you are an IT manager. That is crucial for the success of a product. Let that be very clear.
Indeed. And for me, that's what I think is going to be, of course, if we could go back and take a look at the data that you had before you had these more digital tools, and now it'd be very curious also to see your cycle times. Now, I will talk of sales cycle times. And now, of course, there is a learning curve as well, right? When you're launching something new, it takes people some time to understand how long it takes for them to take a look at it. But once you become more well-known, of course, you have that part. But I'll be very curious to see that your ability to customize your messages leads to shorter sales cycle times, which I'm assuming that in your case, because you're working with the distributors, shorter sales cycle times, actually, they would love it because the more they sell, I'm assuming that the more money that they make. Am I correct in assuming that as well?
Absolutely, absolutely. Because it's for us the key metric that we're using is what is called sell out, and that is actually the number of products that get shipped from our distributors to resellers and to customers, because that is ultimately driving the business. What we are selling to the distis is the money that we are making as BARCO, which is of course very important as well.
Yeah.
But that is not a leading metric. The leading metric is the sell out. If the distributor sells 1,000 pieces in 1 month, it's very logical for them to order another pieces. Otherwise, they won't have stock anymore for the month after. So that is a key dynamic in our market.
Indeed. So this is great. So now help me understand this. So let's say, for example, you are going to run a marketing campaign, right? So for example, when you run your marketing campaign, how do you then make sure that you keep track of, here is what you've done to the marketing campaign, these are the leads coming from this, and how do you then make sure that those leads gets passed on to the right salesperson? In this case, it's a distribution, right? But it could, if you have chosen to work with your own salespeople, then from a marketing perspective, you need to make sure that the leads reach the right salesperson, right? So how do you keep track of that?
Yeah, the way we work, first of all, it's about bringing in quality leads. Yeah. And so for us, the definition of a lead is a very strict one. It means that you need to express interest in the product. It means you need to be asking for a price, or you need to be asking for a demo of the product. Anything before that stage is called inquiries, also very important because there's a lot of nurturing to be done there. But the real story for us starts the moment you are a lead. And what do we do then? Within the next 48 hours after you've left your details via the website or at an event or so with us, our inside sales team will be in touch with you and they will further qualify the lead. And for that, we use the so-called band method from Serious Decisions. So you need to have a budget, you need to have decision-making authority, there needs to be a clear need, of course, and there needs to be a timing for your project. One of the 4 conditions is not met, your lead will be further nurtured. It will not yet be shared with either our internal sales team or with our distributors and partners for follow-up. So that is a very important element. This qualification is crucial because if you bring in high quality leads into your channels, it's very easy for them to follow up. The chances of success are a lot higher. It's going to shorten the sales times and it's going to increase the likelihood that people will buy. And that is what we've been focusing on. And we can now say that at this point in time, based on all the metrics we have, every lead that we bring in as a marketing team will ultimately result in 1 sale, in 1 unit. So that means for us, if we bring in, let's say, 1,000 leads on a monthly basis, we know that we're going to sell 1,000 units
at least
on marketing activities.
At least, assuming that they buy 1 piece. It could be that they could buy. Now, a couple of things linked to that. So one of the things you talk about is band. And for me, it's fascinating because now we're talking about an inside sales. Now, does the inside sales team reside in BARCO? Or do you expect your distributors to actually have inside sales teams?
The inside sales teams reside in BARCO. And I say teams because we do have teams in each of the regions we are active in. And to be honest, there's a lot of learning there as well. Because we used to outsource this part when we increased our marketing activities. And we quickly found out that the quality is lower if you outsource this. And that's why we are very happy now to have inside sales teams in all of the key regions where we are active.
Fantastic. So now I want to link to this and then I'll come back to the one. So when you talk about this inside sales teams, there is now talk that these inside sales teams increasingly have to be under the supervision of the marketing department. First, is it the same in BARCO? Second, what are your thoughts on this?
So first of all, no, that's not the case in BARCO. The
Yeah.
inside sales team reports into the sales organization of the region.
Yeah.
What is my view on this? To me, it's actually irrelevant, and let me explain why.
Yeah.
It's all about making the right handshakes within the organization. And if you know what to expect from one another, it is not important who you are reporting to.
Mm.
We as a company, we are globally active. We have sales and field marketing teams in all the major regions. So that means we are a matrix organization. And the key element for me, or I would say the key element for us to be successful, is making sure you know what to expect from one another, making sure you have these handshakes in place. And once you have them in place, you can be successful whatever your organizational setup is.
Fantastic. Now, one of the things which I want to ask you linked to that is that when you have an inside sales, that's working with the sales organization, right? So the sales organization then trains them on the basic sales skills. But when I have to qualify a lead, I need to be asking questions that can either be done through my any way of, you know what I mean, AI kind of bots or inside sales, depending upon what they want. So my question is, to what role does marketing play a role in providing the right kind of questions to be asked? Am I making sense out here? Because handshakes infers that, right? Handshake infers that, hey, I'm going to use this information based on my market research on my website, on my marketing campaign. So I need to have the same vocabulary when my inside salespeople talk to the customer. To what extent do you think that you and your team are doing that? And where does field marketing fit into this?
What is very important to me is it's about enabling an organization, and whether this comes down to inside sales, whether this comes down to the salespeople themselves or the partners, you need to provide them with the right tools. And so what we do as a team, for instance, is we have sales playbooks that we provide. We have demo scripts that we provide to people. We provide a lot of conversation starters. We provide talking points. So it's us preparing a lot of tools that people can use. At the same time, let me stress, just having somebody who reads from a playbook is not, this person is not going to be successful, because you need to put your heart and your soul in. So what we do is we provide a number of tools to start from. It's up to the sales team. It's up to the inside sales team, whoever is using the material. You have to make sure you master it and you make it personal. And an easy way to compare would be, if I gave you a product presentation, Deva, and you would have to go out and talk Clickshare to people, I'm sure after one or two presentations, you would have customized the slides, you would have changed the order, you would have highlighted other elements on the slides, because you want to bring your story and you're looking for maximum impact yourself.
But for me, that's I think is what is interesting, because you talk about enablement, right? And one of the things that we talk about is that enablement right now is we're doing some research on enablement, and we're finding out that so many companies have different names for enablement. I'm looking at a more holistic view of what enablement is from within BARCO. And maybe when I conclude this call, I'm going to ask you what your definition of sales enablement, I'm going to not say marketing, I'm going to call sales enablement is from your perspective. But before we get there, a couple of other questions too. So what you have is you have an inside sales that does this, and does the inside sale then pass it on to your channel partners, or what is the process once they do the lead qualification?
There's actually two things that can happen. First of all, if it is what we call Fortune 1000 company, if it is a big account, we do have business development managers who take care of the relationship, because they have slower or longer sales cycles very often, different requirements. They need often a lot of technical advice as well. So if it is a big account, it goes to one of our BDMs, and they will follow up. Let me stress, fulfillment will always be through the channel. So there will never, ever be a direct sale for Clickshare, because we think it's very important to keep the trust of our channel partners there as well, by not bypassing them. But so the big accounts are BDMs. Other leads will go to our partners, and then they will follow up. So they will get a qualified lead. They know there is a lot of value in the lead, and they know that every lead on average will lead to the sale of 1 unit. So it is in their best interest to follow up on the leads, because if they don't, they will get less leads moving forward. And of course, also it's in our best interest to provide as many leads as possible, because the more leads, the more business our partners will do, the more money we will make in the end.
Indeed. Now, to what extent do you actually have visibility about how these leads are followed up? Because the fact is that a lot of things can happen, right? A lot of things can happen. But the question is that to what extent does marketing or sales, who is responsible for it, actually has visibility of how the leads progress and any kind of analysis? So for example, I might have lost a lead because the person in the sales organization of my distributor might have messed up, right? So my question is, to what extent do you have control as BARCO? Now, I'm not even saying marketing or sales, because I would love to understand who's responsible for it, but BARCO or marketing or sales, who has visibility of how the distributor is taking it through? And two is, if they lose the deal or things like that, how much of that is you making sure that your message that you worked so hard to bring to the market is not kind of hijacked, maybe for all the wrong reasons? There are a lot of bad things that happen even with good intentions, right? So my point is, how do you make sure that you have visibility as well as make sure that your message is clearly going to the end customers?
Yeah. So the way we do it today is we do have what we call quarterly lead to deal researches. What does this mean? All the leads that we've collected in a given quarter, at the end of the quarter, we will have a telemarketing agency call them, and they will ask the question, hey, did you actually buy? Are you still planning to buy? Did you not buy the product, and so on? And then, of course, there are a number of questions in there. How long did it take for you to get a quote? If you bought, are you happy? What's your NPS score? Would you recommend this to another person? If you didn't buy, what's the reason you did not buy? Is it because of price? Is it because the product did not meet your requirements? So there's a lot of insights, a lot of information we are getting out of those quarterly lead to deal researches. And that was our way, I would almost say, of trying to close the loop without having to rely on partners feeding back a lot of data to us. That's how we do it today. But we also have a New Year's resolution, like anybody. And our New Year's resolution for 2020 is we want to be a lot closer to real time in closing the loop. What do I mean by this? Instead of waiting a quarter, we will now, 1 or 2 weeks max after you've spoken with our inside sales team, you will get a survey from us. And there's only going to be 2 or 3 questions in there, but it's going to be centered around, hey, are you planning to buy, or did you already buy? So we're going to measure your buying intent immediately after the interaction with the inside sales team. And in this way, we will become, or we will get very, very close to making the marketing sourced leads into sort of a leading metric for our organization.
Fantastic. Now, I'll be very curious to see at some point, because this is going to be more expensive for you, right? Because at the end of the day is that a quarterly is, sure, from the viewpoint of if it makes more money for you, that's great. But from the viewpoint of the costs involved, it's going to be pretty significant. And at some point in time, I think there's going to be very interesting to see whether the results that you get from immediate follow-up as against what you had in the past is to see what is the level of efficiencies there. And then you might make a call. But I think that's what you have in mind. Is that, am I correct? Or is it something that you say, you know what, this is the way forward?
It's the way forward, because for what I mean, as an organization, as a marketing organization, what is very important is to show the added value you're bringing. And for us in BARCO, that is today we can proudly say that that about 15% of our revenues are marketing sourced. And if you compare that to a lot of industry benchmarks, I think that's more than decent. And we would like to keep on growing this to more than 20% actually. And for me, this is also the way to defend the budgets, because if I have to go to my VP and I need to defend the budget, or I need to ask for more marketing money, the easiest way is to say, hey, if you put in $1 million, you're going to get 3.6 million extra out of this. That's marketing ROI we have at the moment. It's an easier conversation than if you have to say, hey, if you put in $1 million, I'm going to give you back $500,000.
Indeed. Yeah, no, so going back, so essentially this is your one way of trying to make sure that things don't get lost through your distribution partners as well, right? Now, how do you make sure that when you ask a question whether they're going to buy or not, it still does not take into account why they might not buy, right? So how do you try to make sure that the message that is being brought about by your distributors, salespeople, stays true to what you envisage and what you are communicating to the market out there?
That's where enablement comes into play. So for us, what is very important is to make sure you have all the tools you need to be successful. You need to be able to articulate all the messages.
Yeah.
And from that point onwards, I mean, that's the logic, I would almost say, of using distribution and using a network of thousands of resellers. You lose control of your message to a certain extent.
Indeed,
So
right?
the way we do it is we bring it back to the core. We bring it back to a number of fundamentals. That's the ones we keep on repeating. We try to get all the complexity out of the message, because we know the more complex and the more nuance you put in a message through a channel, the more likely it's going to get diluted. So that's how we do it. I'm not sure whether that's a magic recipe or not, but at least it seems to be working for us. But it's very hard once you have a certain perception, once you have a certain message out there in the market, it's very hard to change it. And the best moments to change are very often a new product introduction, because at that point in time, it's easy to add to the perception, to add to the connotations that you have.
Indeed. Now, one of the things that I hear from the concept of sales enablement practice is this concept of peer sharing. Now, the idea of sales enablement in this case is more about salespeople within an organization, but you can easily kind of translate it into an extended sales organization with your salespeople, with your channel partners as well. As to what extent do you think moving forward that you are going to play a critical role in sharing best practices across channel partners? Because there could be certain things that your channel partners, some channel partners are doing a fantastic job that instead of waiting, things maybe even better than what you had initially planned. So how do you try to make sure that you are not so stuck to saying we are the only way forward, that we actually are going to learn and have peer learning amongst your channel partners? How do you try and do that?
A number of ways to do this. First of all, I mean, until now, I've spoken about what we call marketing sourced activities. Next to that, of course, you have a lot of sales sourced leads that you bring in.
Indeed.
And we also have a category that we call either channel sourced or marketing influenced. And why is this important? Because we have relatively big MDF amounts, market development funds, that are made available to our distributors and our golden resellers. And so they can use those funds for demand gen activities out there. But so with every activity they do, they need to submit a plan for the activity, and they also need to submit the results. So we start understanding, hey, if they are doing a lot of open houses, what's the return of that one? If our reseller base is investing in Google AdWords, we know what is the projected return, and so on. So little by little, we are starting to master this. And also here we are trying to close the loop. To be honest with you, Deva, we haven't closed the loop completely yet.
No need.
But we are getting there and trying to understand what works and what is beneficial to both our partners.
No, I love this. Now, do you even envisage something where you have your golden resellers coming in at some point in time and then have a workshop saying what works, what does not work? You know what I mean? In that way, that's something that you planned?
We haven't done that yet. We do have people that are called channel marketeers as part of our field marketing organizations. And they build annual plans with disties and the golden resellers. So they put everything in there. There is quarterly follow-up. So that's what happens. There's a lot of challenging from partner to partner. There's a lot of practice sharing, but it's always BARCO initiated for now. We don't have partners proactively share one with the other.
No. But does BARCO provide a platform where these people can come together in one place? You see what I mean? Or it doesn't have to be a place, right? Increasingly, you can do it digitally as well. So you can have these kind of the Clickshare channel portal, where essentially what you do is that best practices are documented by your channel marketers so that other people can learn. Is that something that you envisage moving forward? Or is that something that you say, nah, maybe it's still BARCO driven, but it's BARCO enabled, right? It's much where you're giving them a voice to actually become more well known.
Yeah, we do have a platform. It's called My BARCO, where people can download a lot of materials, where people can get together. And I would like us to follow your lead on this one and add the knowledge exchange to this platform. For now, it is there. It's a person-to-person exchange, but it would be good to have that in the platform as well.
So now let me bring you to one of my last questions, because I think we can discuss this forever. So first of all, if I were to ask you to define sales enablement, I know you're in marketing, but you have a much broader view. How would you define sales enablement?
I can be very short on that one.
Yeah.
Make your sales team successful.
Yeah.
That's the short version of it, but I mean it, because it's doing everything that a sales team needs to be successful. And to be honest, I mean, I was talking about marketing source leads and marketing influenced and sales source leads and so on. We know in the end where the lead comes from is not so important. It's about what happens with the lead. It's how it gets followed up. There are people who will complete like 80% of the journey without talking to sales, and there are people who will only complete 2% or even not a single percent of the journey before they talk with sales. So the most important here is you're in this together. There is no sales, there is no marketing, there is just doing business together and winning together.
Indeed. So for me, what is very interesting, and I'm a salesperson, so I'm not saying that I'm doing it, but for me, what happens is that I think as long as there has to be a kind of a cohesion in what your website says in terms of what your salespeople. So a customer may choose to go to your website, or they may choose to talk to a salesperson. But if they talk to a salesperson and then go visit your website and find a different story, that's not what you want. So I think neither do you want a situation where your website says a lot more than what your salespeople are doing, because either way, it's BARCO that's going to suffer. So in my opinion, I think it's very naive today. And I love your answer. It does not matter if a customer has done 57%, 70%, whatever number that is. The question is, as long as we take a look at where does the customer get that information, and once they do that information, the customer is always going to go back and reassure themselves that when they do that, whatever channel they choose from at that point in time says the same message, be it with your channel partners too, which I think if you are smart enough and have a good marketing team like what you seem to be doing here, then I think you are going to reap the benefits far more, which I think the fact that how much you've actually contributed to the growth of Clickshare because of your marketing-led sales enablement activities, I think is what other companies can learn from, not just tech-based companies. Because when I talk to a lot of tech-based companies with SaaS services, it's very obvious for them in terms of sales enablement. But I think you are a classical example of how sales enablement can work very well. And what would be wonderful at some point in time is to also have your sales counterpart take us through this whole journey and say how they look at it as well. Because I really think that if done well, this can be amazing, because what you want is that you want a coherence in your message and not confuse your customers, especially when the customers in your case have an alternate, right? An alternate is, hey, you just raise your hand and say your thoughts. It's not the same as showing you see what I mean? Your competition, the way I look at Clickshare, is your biggest competition is somebody just raising their hand saying, verbally saying something. And essentially when you have to do that, you have to tell a customer why you have to invest in this. And that for me is that message is something that's very, very critical. So channel enablement, that's my last question to you. So we talk about sales enablement, but it looks like you're doing a lot in terms of channel enablement, right? So to what extent are the sales playbooks that you talk about shared openly with your channel partners? So obviously you share the leads, but you also share your you see what I mean? The sales playbooks with your channel partners as well?
Yeah, in the toolkits that we make, some tools are labeled as BARCO people only. Other tools are available to partners as well. So for instance, if it is about how to demo, if it is about conversation starters, if it is about the thought leadership pieces that we make, those are available to anybody. It is about competition handling, for instance. That's something that will most often, there's going to be a version for BARCO people. There's going to be a different version for our partners. So topic by topic, we decide whether or not partners get access to the same information or not. But the going in principle is we share as much as possible with all of our partners. So they should have the same information as our internal sales teams.
Right. Well, Lieven, thank you so much for taking your time to share some of your thoughts. Very interesting from a viewpoint of a B2B marketer, but who actually is helping drive sales. And I think it really brings the question of where is marketing, where is sales, where is that line blurring? And that's very, very curious. And hopefully as we progress, we'll get more insights from other companies that are also dealing in these kinds of challenges as well. So thank you so much for sharing your time, Lieven.
It was a pleasure, Deva, and I can only repeat, it's about making sales win. That's Absolutely. What we exist for on this planet.
Indeed. Thank you all for tuning in to this session of the Sales Webinar Series. Stay tuned to the next one. Thanks.